And any immediate questions from the audience?
Okay, so I have a question, and this is a question to all of you. I run the research lab for the University of Pennsylvania, and we're kind of your, right, right out there systems, standard systems neuroscience lab. We have 2 photon pulsing data, electrophysiology data. We use all different kinds of electrodes. We have neuropixels, we have other electrodes, we do optogenetics. We have behavioral data, we do all kinds of different behaviors. Each behavior is custom coded with its own kind of little software package that we write for that program. And what I'm wondering about, and we store our data locally, we back it up to a standard cloud server, and when we put everything on bioarchive, all our publications go on bioarchive. When we put them on bioarchive, we also post our data to an online archive. And I'm now realizing that, and we're also, among other sources, Brain Initiative funded. So I'm now realizing, we should really be making use of your resources, but we haven't so far. And what I'm curious about, how should we start about doing it? Which resources should we use? And, how can we do we send people somewhere? Should I send people somewhere to get educated? Is there some way to collaborate? Could, one of members of your team come to us and because even just if I told you about the kinds of data that I'm collecting, that would take a good hour.
So first of all, I think you should start with publishing white paper about your workflow. And I'm not kidding, because there is many labs and there is no exchange of kind of know-how, right? So publishing that would be important, and then enhancing it would be next step. And because Dimitri took strategic first seat, right? So I guess he could have a chance to answer first.
We'll be happy to work with you. So, we have a broad range of ways to engage. We do consultations with users, right? Where, yes, we will sit down with you for an hour and listen to your workflow and try to come up with suggestions. Sending, members of your team to one of the training events is definitely useful. But, then there's other engagements like, Catalyst Neuro as a company that you can hire to do certain, tasks in this kind of conversion process or data join, right? So there's a variety of options available. I think what it really comes down to is engage with the teams to decide what is the best path for your particular lab. Is it that you want to do that, take these steps yourself, or do you need more help from the teams, or do you need to hire someone else to help you implement those strategies?
In terms of using the tools that I just described, I think the best step would be to contact Catalyst Neuro, I think, to see going forward. But also the Dandy helpline would be, or the online resources. I've had a lot of success using those for Dandy.
And I'm going to kind of go back to the neuroimaging community as an example a little bit. One of the challenges with neurophysiology is the diversity of instruments and other processes that you just alluded to, right? In neuroimaging, all scanners produce the same kind of data. So that community was able to coalesce around a standardization very early on in the process, which has helped that community then build up all the subsequent things that go on. So in the context of something like this, you saw a page where I said where you can go for help. Absolutely can leverage that. But I would also say that as a community, we need to kind of come to standardization around our data acquisition systems. So OpenEFIS is one, Bonsai is another, and how we use those tools to help standardize the process. Because the more you can do early in standardizing some of the information, the easier these downstream things that we've been talking about become. And we're happy to work with you to figure that out.
Any other question? Dimitri?
Yes, so data governance more broadly, including with animal subject, including with humans, is at the foundation of data management, should be addressed. It should be a specific aim in any proposal for data archives or so with our tools, we provide open source tools where it's on the team to implement those controls. When we engage where we provide this as a service, then it's on us to implement the like HIPAA compliance and the identification and so this is a pretty well described and prescribed process that we are ready to implement. We run one human study right now on human organoids with the University of Utah. We have to comply with these standards. Yes, so this is a difficult problem, but not unsurmountable. It's something that each team has to address. So yes, it's specific to each project, but the process is fairly well defined.
And maybe I'll just add a notion of risk, right? So we often talk about privacy versus not privacy, but don't always have the conversation on risk. And I'll give the answer through the lens of de-identification. So there are MR data sets out there which have been stripped of the face. Brain is a fingerprint, but so from a strict de-identification standpoint, one might consider that it hasn't been de-identified. Right? And we have to do this for every data type that we produce to ask the question, is the neurophysiological, the neuropixels recording a signature or a fingerprint of an individual? And that's a scientific question. And I think people are working on it in various places, in various, but given the diversity of instruments that measure human data today, and with the new programs like BBQS coming online, I think this is going to become an important question in the context of the BRAIN Initiative, is understanding what does identification mean, and how do we think about consent, identification, and risk associated with releasing certain types of information. We're not going to solve that problem right this minute, but I think that's a conversation that needs to happen across the BRAIN Initiative and other programs in thinking about identifiability. The GDPR places some very specific restrictions, and even there, most recently, I think a lawsuit led to a decision by the European Court that said, if it is difficult to re-identify, then it can be considered anonymized data. It's a very slippery slope of a lawsuit, and one has to kind of understand what it means. So previously it would be considered pseudonymized data, that each individual's data still belongs to the individual and not anonymized. But this lawsuit switches the boundary of that. So this is kind of an interaction between policy, law, and human rights and ethics. So I think it's a conversation that the community needs to continue to have in terms of how to do this. There are some examples of what I call personal data stores and other things that have come online. Again, part of this is, can we get data out of where the PI necessarily needs to agree to access? And I think the broader use of this is really about how we get data in a shared space. It does not mean it cannot be restricted, protected, to protect the rights of the individual. Or a community in certain cases. And so I think those conversations need to continue. Technology is only one part of that solution.
And shameless plug, there is also, first you need to get consent from the person, right? So, and sometimes it's forgotten. It's forgotten until too late, right? Until you decide to share, but you can't. Then it's really hard to get back. There is a project, Open Brain Consent Form, in which there is formalization of the wording you could use, and there is also GDPR version. Maybe that would be of help too. Okay, Jorge keeps stretching his.
Higher excitation state. I wanted to get back to one thing which was exemplified in the last presentation, but I think Satra mentioned it, where his prophetic statement that in 20 years there will be no more upload and download. And in a sense, you embody that by showing exactly how you could run your analysis in the cloud. My question in light of that is, how do you think that reflects on the transparency and flexibility of the process?
Well, the processors, for example, Kilosort 2.5 and Kilosort 3, et cetera, that were used there, there's a repository that defines that, that processing job, and the code is there to build the container. So I think it's from my perspective, it's even more, what is the word, safe than if somebody downloaded a package and ran it on their own machine and then reported back what they used. Like you can there's actually a record of what was used, how it was built, and how it ran. So I think there's advantages of the cloud system for doing that.
Yeah, if anything, automated workflows, they increase the observability and reproducibility of any computation because you capture the entire process, and this is why a lot of research groups go to automated workflows so that you can capture, so there's no manual step, and it still integrates a lot of open source tools, but plus a lot of these automation frameworks allow you to observe the entire process, accessing the data. So I question the premise whether automation reduces the observability and transparency. In most cases, it does the opposite. Sorry, what GCC version? So,
well,
it's in the container.
There's a Docker
Yeah.
script. There's a Docker file script, and you can see exactly what
so
was used.
That's what
yeah.
Docker exactly does. It builds everything from version software, and yeah. So these are built images.
On this high note of version of GCC, I think we should just conclude this session and go for lunch.